Hey guys, Socket here, starting the sound deadening on the boot lid. What I'm doing at the moment is just cut out some squares, just using a pair of scissors. We'll take these down to the car and I'll show you what we're up to. Okay, so this boot lid has just get the torch out. You can see in here there's the skin of the boot lid itself, so we're going to take some of those squares and just apply some deadening in there. So basically just going to take all these squares, take the backing paper off, and then just basically feed it in here into position. Make sure that that's sticking down and adhering properly, and then using getting the roller in there just to make sure that it adheres nicely to the surface, and we give it a good roll. So let's have a look. So there we are. And we just repeat that all the way along here. So I'll do that, and we'll catch up in a minute. Okay, we've got that dampening put inside this inside line of the boot lid. Tricky to get to some of the places, so we're ready to move on to the next step. So what I'm going to do now is put the boot trim back on so we can mark the outside of that, and so we've got a boundary so we know where not to cross over when we put the deadener on this inside skin. Okay, back in a tick. Alright, we've got the boot trim back in place. Just popped a couple of these clips just in, not all of them, just hold it in place long enough. And so now what I'm going to do is just mark where the liner will end, just like this, all the way around. Most of this just follows this bend in the metal, but so the good thing about this crayon is it should just rub off the metal. Okay, so we'll just take these clips out now, and we'll start putting in the sound deadener. Okay, with the boot liner removed again, you can see where we've marked out the edge, and look, it pretty much covers the or follows the edge where it's sort of beaded in along here. So now we're going to start on the sound deadening part. Probably going to avoid these surfaces here because they come flush with the edge of the boot itself, and they're pretty solid, so I'm not going to worry too much about those. I will start covering from this point down through here and all this flat area here. You need to make sure that you avoid these bolt holes, or those holes for the clips, I mean. The other piece of these access holes, so I'm not going to, a lot of people say, oh, you got to do something in case. Well, the number of times they're going to have to fix the boot and might have to remove some sound deadening, I'll live with that. So I'm going to cover up as much as I can around the indicators here and that type of thing. The one thing just need to note on the E92 though is if I cover this hole here, I'm then going to have a problem because the liner itself has these like hand grip indents, because they anyway, so I'm going to have to sort of figure that piece out, because they literally clip in under here. So I'll get started on that and come back when I've done a little bit. Right, so started on the sound deadening in here. This was the problem area that I was talking about before. It needed to be indented. So what I basically did was run a strip of sound deadener this way, and then another strip here to form a little pouch, and then another strip that sort of closed that open end up. Test fitted the liner, and it fits in nicely there. So that's now a good sealed little pocket. On the other side, there is a mechanism for the hood release, so I don't need to do the same thing on the other side. So I'm just going to sort of basically put some sound deadener in around the bits that needed in there. And now I'm starting to seal up this hole. I'm sort of working across here. If I ever need to get in and change the latch, it's just a matter of cutting this and pulling it away, so that's no big deal. So made a start on that, and I'll catch you when I've done a little bit more. Okay, I've got the next bit of dampening put in, so both of those holes are now wrapped. Just show a little more detail in there. Come out pretty nice. One thing I did discover along the way is some of these spots are too small for the roller, so this roller is shaped really nicely to be able to sort of get in there and press those bits into place. You don't want them really peeling off when it heats up in summer. So that's a little trick. The other piece of advice is don't throw out any of your offcuts. Lots of fiddly little areas where they will come in handy, so hold on to them as well. So making progress. I'll continue and do a little bit more. Alright, we've got the next part of the sound deadening done. All of these holes are sealed up, including the indicators. So what I've done with the indicators is just left it as one big sheet, so if I need to get in there, I can just take that off and replace it. I've got LED bulbs in there, so shouldn't have to get in there too often. So ready for the next part. That was pretty fiddly, so I'll do a little bit more. Okay, now going to cover up this section here. I'm thinking of doing it in a single sheet, sort of that way. It's just big enough to sort of wrap around between this edge of the boot and up here. Just going to slip it here underneath the wires and run it right along the middle to cover up those little holes in the that middle beam. So, and I'm going to use just a yellow crayon to mark that out and cut into shape. So it's a bit hard to do that while holding the camera, so I'm just going to do that and then cut back. So I got the sheet marked up. You can see it with the yellow crayon, and I'll cut that out and see if that fits. Right, that's cut out and that is looking awesome. So always good to test fit it before you peel the backing paper off, of course. So I'll go ahead and fit that now. Okay, so I'm starting to apply the sound deadening sheet, starting from the bottom, because this edge here needs to be nice and straight. And I'm peeling the backing sheet away a little bit at a time, not in one big go, and then pressing it into position as I move up the sheet. Taking note not to cover up the bolt holes, and that's where those little hole cutting tool comes in handy, and just put it in there and mark it out and cut the hole in so it's nice and clean. So the finished sheet is now in place. Pressed down pretty tough with the roller, so you'll notice that on this particular sheeting you've got this looks like crocodile skin, and when you roll it out and press it in really well, that sort of pattern tends to disappear. So it gives you a bit of an indication when you've really got a good seal on your surface. So that's in place and ready to go and do the remaining panels. Alright, getting close to finishing this sound deadening. Just one little trick to cut these complicated parts out. It's often easier just to stick it down first and then use a pair of scissors just to trim along this edge so it makes it nice and neat. Could use some sort of plastic film to do some tracing, but this is all going to be covered up with the boot lid trim, so I'm not so worried about how it looks as long as it sort of stays inside the seal area. So almost done. So just a quick test fit of the liner, and all the holes are lined up and it seems to be fitting really well, so that's good. And there's the sound dampening all finished. I think it came up okay. Certainly sounds less sound coming through that than was before. A bit hard to tell on the video, but it certainly sounds pretty solid. So that's the next stage done. Now to put down some foam liner. Now we're putting in the foam liner. I'm using this acoustic liner, which is a 12mm double layer foam with an adhesive back. So what I'm doing is just basically cutting it into strips and just applying it just inside the edge where the trim will fit, and I'm putting the wiring underneath that, so there's no chance of that rattling. As I said, if I need to access any of these parts in the trunk, I'm going to have to remove all of this stuff, but for the rare occasions that happens, it's not going to be a big deal. So I'll keep going and come back when we've got this piece done. Okay, so the acoustic liner is now in. Basically all cut into strips. Got a big strip that runs down the middle here, and smaller strips running down here, and padded up all inside this hole, and same over here, but I've left the backing on here so in case I need to get to the boot latch release for some reason. So now I'm just going to apply some tape and the soundproofing is done. Okay, so the final result. The acoustic liner is all taped up with some cloth tape, and that's looking pretty good. I'm pretty happy with that. Now we'll put the boot trim back on and fingers crossed it all fits. One question people might have about the project is how much did I use to do the boot lid? So very quickly, the acoustic liner comes in sheets of 1 metre by 900 centimetres. You can see the sheet on the bottom and what I have left over from a sheet to do the boot lid. So I used about 2/3 of a sheet. And for the sound dampener, they come in boxes of 12 sheets, 500mm by 300mm, and I used about 5 sheets in total, and probably let's call it 6 sheets because I have one sheet which is being converted into offcuts, but as I said, keep them because we'll use them during the rest of the project. So just in case you're trying to follow along and figure out just how much material we're using, 2/3 of sheet of acoustic liner and about 5 sheets of sound deadener. So here we have it. The liner fits a bit more snugly than it did before, but fits no problems. So it's sounds okay. I'm not sure how it'll sound inside the car, but it sounds alright. And boot release is working, the number plate lights are working, first camera's working, so I would call that a success for stage 1. Alright, so now on to the rest of the boot. So that's it for this video. I will catch you in the next one.